Nobody in the room remembered the stranger's name. Not the bartender. Not the men crowded near the back wall. Not even the woman who had been standing closest when it happened. Later, when people tried to describe him, the details kept shifting. Different jacket, different voice, different height. But everyone agreed on one thing. 6 seconds. That was all it took. 6 seconds between the moment he stepped forward and the moment the entire atmosphere of the place changed. Glasses froze mid-air. Conversations died without warning. Something invisible moved through the room like a pressure wave, and at the center of it all, a man who hadn't raised his voice once. Bruce Lee. Friday night, the 18th of April, 1969. The kind of evening when Los Angeles felt unusually soft around the edges, as if the city had agreed to loosen its grip for a few hours. On Pico Boulevard, traffic rolled past in restless waves, headlights smearing across polished car hoods. Inside the Golden Dragon restaurant, the air carried a layered mix of soy sauce, cigarette smoke, and something sweet simmering in the kitchen. The place wasn't glamorous. Red vinyl booths, round tables with lazy Susans that rotated unevenly, a long mirror behind the bar, slightly warped, bending reflections just enough to be distracting if you stared too long. Near the far wall, beneath a hanging lantern with a faint crack along its rim, Bruce Lee sat alone. No entourage, no spectacle. Just a dark jacket folded neatly beside him and a half-finished cup of tea cooling by his hand. Anyone scanning the room quickly might have missed him. He wasn't performing presence. He wasn't demanding space. Still, there was something about the stillness. While conversations overlapped and utensils chimed against porcelain, Bruce barely moved. His posture relaxed but exact. Shoulders loose, spine straight without effort. Now and then his fingers tapped lightly against the ceramic cup, not impatient. More like a quiet rhythm only he could hear. Across the room, a pair of studio assistants argued in low voices over a casting decision. A birthday group near the window laughed too loudly, their energy spilling into nearby tables. A waiter navigated the maze of chairs with mechanical precision, balancing 3 plates along his forearm. Normal noise, normal motion. And yet the space around Bruce carried an odd clarity, as though the air itself behaved differently within a few feet of him. People glanced without meaning to. Eyes lingered, then slid away. No one could have explained why. Bruce's gaze drifted lazily through the room, not fixed on anything, not searching, observing maybe, or simply existing without friction. Outside, a car door slammed. Inside, nobody noticed. But seconds later, the front entrance opened, and a man stepped in, bringing with him a subtle, almost inaudible shift that no one consciously registered, though several conversations stumbled for reasons their speakers would never understand. The door didn't swing open dramatically. It eased inward with a muted creak, the brass hinge releasing a tired sigh. For a brief moment, cool night air slipped inside, stirring the hanging paper decorations near the entrance. The man who stepped through paused just long enough for the door to close behind him. Average height, maybe 5 to 10. Dark sport coat, slightly wrinkled at the elbows. Hair combed back, with careful effort, though a few strands had already escaped. Nothing about him screamed for attention, and yet, attention moved anyway, not in a single, obvious wave. More like a chain of tiny disruptions. A fork hesitated halfway to someone's mouth. A laugh cut short for no clear reason. The bartender's eyes lifted, then lowered again, instinctively cataloging without curiosity. The stranger's gaze traveled slowly, not the casual wandering of someone looking for a table. His eyes measured the room with deliberate pacing, touching faces, corners, exits. A small, analytical sweep. He didn't smile, didn't frown, just assessed. He began walking, unhurried, but with a curious precision, each step landing firmly, heel then toe, as though he had already mapped the floor, shoes polished, reflecting dull amber light from the lanterns above. His shoulders stayed squared, chin slightly elevated. Confidence, yes, but layered with something sharper. A waiter approached, menu in hand. "Table for one?" The stranger barely looked at him. A faint shake of the head. Not rude, not polite. Just dismissive in the way people sometimes are when their attention is already occupied. Because it was. Halfway across the restaurant, his eyes stopped. Bruce Lee hadn't moved. Still seated, still relaxed. Tea untouched. But the stranger's body registered the recognition first, a near-invisible tightening along the jawline, the smallest adjustment in breathing, a microsecond of recalibration. He knew exactly who he was looking at. Around them, the restaurant continued its fragile imitation of normalcy. Conversations resumed, though softer now, uncertain. A woman near the bar followed the stranger with quiet curiosity, sensing a tension she couldn't name. The man changed direction without hesitation, straight toward Bruce. No theatrics, no announcement, just the unmistakable trajectory of intent. By the time the stranger crossed the midpoint of the room, people were already inventing stories, not consciously. No one leaned over to declare theories. It happened in that silent, human way, quick judgments, stitched together from posture, clothing, fragments of instinct. A man walking with purpose toward another man who hadn't acknowledged him yet. That alone was enough. At the birthday table, the loudest voice lowered without realizing it. One of the studio assistants stopped mid-sentence, eyes drifting sideways. Even the waiter who'd been dismissed lingered near the service station, pretending to reorganize chopsticks that didn't need reorganizing, because something felt arranged. The stranger's stride carried an unmistakable edge now. Not aggressive, not hesitant. It was the walk of someone rehearsing confidence in real time, as if each step reinforced a decision already made. His shoulders stayed rigid, his gaze locked forward. Bruce Lee remained seated. From a distance, the contrast bordered on surreal, motion cutting through stillness, noise dissolving against quiet. The stranger's presence created ripples. Bruce's seemed to absorb them. Speculation thickened. Some recognized Bruce immediately, the young martial arts instructor whose reputation had begun circulating through Hollywood circles like controlled wildfire. Others knew only the outline of the legend. Fast hands, unusual intensity, rumors of demonstrations that left audiences confused and vaguely unsettled. No one, however, had expected a scene, which made the stranger's approach feel charged with disproportionate meaning. Every small movement suddenly mattered. The angle of his chin, the set of his mouth, the fact that Bruce hadn't turned yet. A couple near the window exchanged a glance. "Do they know each other?" the woman whispered. Her companion didn't answer. He was watching too closely, as though the space between the two men had become a narrowing corridor where something irreversible might occur. The stranger slowed as he neared the table. Not a dramatic halt, just a subtle deceleration, enough to signal arrival without announcing it. He stopped within arm's length, standing squarely beside Bruce. For half a breath, nothing happened. Bruce lifted his eyes, calm, unhurried, almost curious. And in that small, quiet moment before a single word was spoken, the balance of the entire room shifted in a way everyone felt but no one could later explain. Up close, the stranger looked different. Distance had softened him. At arm's length, the details sharpened faint creases at the corners of his eyes, a sheen of tension across his forehead, the subtle rise and fall of breathing that wasn't quite steady. His confidence, once smooth from afar, now carried microscopic fractures. Bruce said nothing. He didn't lean back, didn't straighten, just watched, eyes clear, expression unreadable. The kind of gaze that made people unexpectedly aware of their own posture. For a second, the stranger hesitated. It was barely visible, a tiny pause where speech should have begun. Then his mouth moved. words arriving with the brittle casualness of someone determined to sound unaffected. So, you're Bruce Lee. Not loud, not soft. The volume was carefully chosen, pitched to travel just far enough to attract attention without appearing theatrical. Bruce's face didn't change. A small nod, almost polite. The stranger shifted his weight. One foot adjusted slightly behind the other, an unconscious brace. Heard a lot about you. Something about the phrasing hung strangely in the air. Not admiration, not curiosity. The words carried an undercurrent that people nearby instantly recognized, that familiar, prickling tone of a challenge disguised as conversation. Several heads turned. Bruce's fingers rested lightly against his teacup. Still, relaxed. Oh? Just one syllable. Even, neutral. The stranger gave a tight smile that never reached his eyes. Yeah, they say you're fast. A nearby table went quiet. Not abruptly. More like sound draining away, replaced by the fragile awareness of unfolding tension. Utensils hovered, shoulders stiffened, human attention magnetized by the possibility of conflict. Bruce blinked once, no defensiveness, no irritation. If anything, mild interest. They say many things. The stranger exhaled through his nose, the smile thinning. That so? Then, a slight lean forward. Small, intentional, the kind of movement meant to narrow space without appearing hostile. But the effect was unmistakable. The social temperature of the room ticked upward, and then it came. Well, he said, voice tightening just enough. I've always wondered if those stories are real, or just Hollywood talk. Not an insult, screamed in anger. Worse, an insult delivered with a smirk calibrated, deliberate, designed to provoke. Bruce's gaze remained steady, but something in the air changed. No sudden reaction, no flash of irritation, no theatrical stillness meant to intimidate. Bruce Lee simply sat there, eyes resting on the stranger with a calm that felt almost detached, as though the comment had arrived from very far away. For a brief, uncomfortable beat, the stranger held his smirk, waiting. People always waited after words like that. For anger, for ego, for the predictable human reflex to defend reputation. The entire room leaned into that expectation, silent in the way crowds become when they sense confrontation hovering just out of sight. Bruce reached for his teacup, unhurried, fingers closing around the ceramic with precise ease. He lifted it, took a small sip, then set it back down with a soft, barely audible click against the saucer. The sound carried, not because it was loud, but because nothing else moved. The stranger's expression flickered. It lasted less than a second, a micro-shift behind the eyes, a hairline crack in the posture. The kind of reaction that reveals itself only when someone's anticipated script fails to unfold. Bruce finally stood, without urgency, without stiffness, one smooth motion, fluid enough to look casual, controlled enough to feel deliberate. His chair slid back slightly, wood legs whispering against the floor, and the effect was immediate. Not fear, something subtler. The stranger's shoulders tightened, chin adjusting almost imperceptibly upward, like a man bracing against an invisible pressure change. Around them, several patrons straightened in their seats, instincts reacting before thought could catch up. Bruce faced him fully now. Relaxed stance. Hands loose at his sides. No trace of aggression. Yet the space between them felt radically altered, as if the geometry of the room itself had shifted. The stranger, moments earlier the initiator, now seemed oddly compressed by comparison. Bruce's voice, when it came, was quiet. You're wondering, he said evenly, if I'm fast? No edge, no challenge in the tone. Just clarity. The stranger swallowed, barely noticeable. Entirely human. Well, Bruce continued, gaze steady, that depends. A pause. Fast compared to what? The question landed with unexpected weight. and something uncertain moved across the stranger's face, the first unmistakable hint that the interaction was no longer unfolding under his control. Silence settled in layers. Not the relaxed quiet of a restaurant between conversations, but something tighter, more fragile. The kind of stillness where tiny sounds grow unnaturally sharp, the hum of fluorescent lights, the faint clink of ice shifting inside a forgotten glass, fabric moving as someone subtly adjusted in their chair. The stranger forced a short laugh. It came out thinner than intended. Compared to? He repeated, buying time his body language betrayed he needed. Compared to anyone. His chin lifted slightly as he spoke, an effort at reclaiming ground. But the movement lacked conviction, like confidence performed from memory rather than instinct. Bruce didn't move. No defensive posture, no readiness display. Just that same relaxed alignment, eyes fixed, breathing slow and invisible. He looked neither tense nor amused, simply present, which made everything worse. Because the stranger now had nowhere to anchor his energy, no aggression to mirror, no hostility to push against, Bruce's composure created a psychological vacuum, quietly pulling the other man's momentum into nothing. Around the room, people felt it. A woman near the bar folded her arms, though the temperature hadn't changed. One of the studio assistants leaned forward, elbows resting on the table, gaze locked. Even the waiters had slowed, their movements cautious, attention drifting repeatedly toward the two men. The stranger stepped closer. Half a step, subtle, but unmistakable. "You know," he said, voice tightening at the edges. "I've seen fighters with big reputations before." His eyes searched Bruce's face for reaction, for friction, for anything resembling emotional purchase. "Nothing. I mean," he continued, words gaining forced volume. "Talk is cheap, right?" Still nothing, and that absence began working against him. The stranger's breathing grew visible now, chest rising a fraction faster. A muscle jumped along his jaw, his hands, once loose at his sides, flexed unconsciously. Bruce's gaze remained steady. Not hard, not threatening, just impossibly calm. The stranger's next words came faster, driven less by intention than by mounting discomfort. "So what? You're saying you won't prove it?" There it was. The room seemed to contract, because everyone sensed the threshold approaching that narrow psychological edge, where pride, doubt, and momentum collide, leaving only one direction forward. Bruce answered without hesitation. "I didn't say that." Same tone, same calm, but the words landed with a quiet finality that tightened something across the stranger's face. For the first time since entering the restaurant, his confidence visibly faltered. "How long?" the stranger asked. The question came abruptly, edged with impatience now. No trace of earlier smoothness. Beneath the challenge, something else had surfaced: urgency, mixed with the growing need to resolve the unbearable tension he himself had created. Bruce tilted his head slightly, a small, almost curious gesture. "How long?" the stranger repeated. "Would it take you?" The room stopped breathing. No one shifted. No one spoke. Even the background noises, kitchen clatter, low music near the bar, seemed to recede into a strange, suspended distance. Bruce's eyes held his. 6 seconds. He said it softly. No bravado, no theatrical emphasis. Just a simple statement delivered with unsettling certainty. For half a beat, the stranger looked confused. Then he moved. Later witnesses would argue over who initiated what. Memory fractures under speed, under shock, under the brain's desperate attempt to reconstruct events it failed to process in real time. But everyone agreed on the sensation. They never saw the beginning. One instant, two men stood facing each other. The next motion, not wild, not explosive, something far more disorienting. Bruce's body seemed to shift with a fluidity that defied normal visual tracking. No visible wind-up, no exaggerated movement, just a sudden collapse of distance. A blur, a sharp, percussive sound. The stranger's balance vanished as if erased. His body twisted sideways, momentum violently redirected. A chair skidded across the floor. Someone gasped the sound loud, involuntary. Then another movement. Faster, cleaner. The stranger stumbled, eyes wide with a confusion bordering on disbelief, limbs no longer responding with coordinated intent. Before comprehension could form, the sequence ended. 6 seconds, no more. Bruce stepped back into stillness, breathing unchanged. Posture relaxed, while the stranger remained frozen in the wreckage of a reality his nervous system had never even managed to register. Sound returned in fragments, not all at once. First, a single, brittle clatter, a fork slipping from someone's hand and striking porcelain with an almost absurd loudness. Then, a chair leg scraping. Then voices, low and uncertain, as though the room itself was cautiously relearning how to function. The stranger didn't move. He stood, or rather, remained caught mid-collapsed, knees bent awkwardly, one hand gripping the edge of a nearby table for support. His face had drained of color, the earlier smirk, the rehearsed confidence, the sharp-edged bravado gone without residue. In its place, disbelief, not theatrical shock. Something more raw. His eyes flicked rapidly, struggling to reconcile internal expectation with external reality. The human brain, confronted with the impossible, often stalls before accepting what the body already knows. A thin line of sauce dripped slowly from the overturned dish beside him. No one rushed forward. Patrons stared with the unguarded intensity of people who had just witnessed something their minds could not comfortably categorize. A woman near the bar pressed her fingers lightly against her lips. One of the studio assistants blinked repeatedly, as if clearing his vision might restore logic to the scene. Bruce Lee stood exactly where he had been, relaxed, shoulders loose, breathing steady. No visible adrenaline, no trace of triumph. If anything, his expression carried a faint, almost apologetic neutrality, the look of a man for whom nothing particularly remarkable had occurred. He glanced briefly at the stranger. Not cold, not sympathetic, simply finished. The stranger straightened with visible effort, dignity now a fragile, collapsing structure. His mouth opened slightly, though no words emerged. Whatever narrative had fueled his approach had evaporated, leaving only the quiet humiliation of miscalculation. Somewhere behind the bar, glassware rattled faintly. Bruce adjusted his jacket sleeve, a small, ordinary gesture. And somehow that normalcy, that complete absence of drama, unsettled the room more than the confrontation itself. Because violence, when stripped of anger and spectacle, carries a different kind of weight, one the witnesses would remember far longer than the movements they never actually saw. Years later, the details refused to settle. Ask 3 people who were there. You'd hear 3 slightly different versions. The jacket was brown. No, charcoal. He swung first. No, he barely moved. Memory is unreliable under shock. The brain edits reality to protect itself from the discomfort of not understanding what it witnessed. But one element never changed. Bruce Lee's stillness. Not the speed, not the mechanics, not even the 6 seconds that would eventually harden into local legend. What lingered, what people described with an odd, searching hesitation, was the composure. No anger, no visible effort, no emotional turbulence. Just a man standing in perfect equilibrium while another human being unraveled under the weight of his own assumptions. Because that was the part no one admitted out loud. The stranger hadn't really been testing Bruce's physical ability. He had been testing an idea, the familiar belief that dominance announces itself loudly, that power needs performance, that confidence must be visible to be real. Bruce dismantled that illusion without ever stating it. There was no speech, no lesson delivered, no cinematic declaration. The philosophy lived entirely inside the moment itself, embedded in behavior rather than words. Economy of motion. Economy of emotion. Nothing wasted, nothing forced, Presence as the decisive factor. Those who replayed the scene later often struggled to articulate why it felt so unsettling. After all, confrontations happen. Fights break out. Challenges escalate. Yet something about this exchange resisted ordinary explanation. Perhaps because it exposed a quiet truth people instinctively resist. Real control is almost invisible. It doesn't flare. It doesn't posture. It doesn't rush to prove itself. It waits, untroubled, allowing tension to exhaust the impatient. And when movement finally comes, it carries none of the chaos that usually accompanies conflict. Only inevitability. On that April evening in Los Angeles, inside a modest restaurant humming with ordinary life, 6 seconds did more than end a confrontation. They rearranged the way an entire room understood confidence. And Bruce Lee, calm as ever, walked back into the noise of the world, leaving behind a story that was never really about speed at all.